Welcome to episode 31 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. I'm your host, Alan Walker, and I'm joined by my brilliant co-hosts, Alison Ettridge and Toby Culshaw. This week, we're thrilled to have Patrick Coolen as our special guest. Patrick is a seasoned HR analytics leader who spent over 20 years at ABN AMRO Bank. He's now a partner at Kennedy Fitch, helping clients build their people analytics roadmaps and upskill their workforces. Patrick is also pursuing a PhD on the adoption and institutionalization of advanced people analytics. In our thought-provoking discussion, Patrick shares valuable insights on topics like the evolution of people analytics at ABN AMRO over 2 decades, key factors driving successful adoption, balancing data science with behavioral science, the importance of dynamic capabilities and integrated HR services, how evidence-based HR should be at the centre of the operating model, the potential future of people analytics in the enterprise analytics space, and finally, last but not least, practical advice for organisations just starting their analytics journey. From data pipelines to decision-making, Patrick brings clarity and wisdom to the complex world of people analytics and evidence-based HR. So get ready to level up your understanding of how data and analytics are transforming the HR function. Grab your favourite beverage, get comfortable, and let's get intelligent.
Before we get on with the main event, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast is proudly sponsored by our friends at Stratagens, and here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you a little bit more about them.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's STRATIGENS.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.
Hello and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. And for the record, it's episode number 31 to be precise.
Yay!
Of course, I couldn't do this without my amazing co-hosts, Alison Ettridge from Stratagens and Toby Culshaw from Amazon. Give us a shout, you two.
Hello!
Very good. Today, we're incredibly excited to have a special guest joining us. So let's give a warm welcome to Patrick Coolen. Patrick, we're thrilled to have you here. Would you mind giving our listeners a quick rundown of who you are and what it is you do, please?
Of course I can, and thanks for having me. Patrick Coolen. I live in Amsterdam with my lovely wife and 2 teenagers. And I led the HR analytic practice at ABN AMRO for over more than 10 years. And before that, I was also part of the HR management team. I also, 2 years ago, started my PhD on the adoption and institutionalization of advanced people analytics. It's easier to say institutionalization than type it, I can assure you. And for over a year, I've been a partner at Kennedy Fitch, helping clients build their people analytic roadmap, helping them upskill their workforce and finding the right executive talent if needed. So that's a bit about me.
Excellent. Thanks for that intro, Patrick. I'm sure our listeners are eager to dive into your wealth of knowledge and experience in the people analytics space. And of course, anything else you want to throw your hat into the ring about and give us your view on over the next hour or so. For our new listeners, we are still picking those up. Let me quickly outline our usual podcast format. We'll kick things off with Toby giving us the rundown on the latest happenings in the TI and people space via our news section. And then Alison, our resident interviewer extraordinaire, I love that word, will engage in a thought-provoking discussion with Patrick, exploring his unique perspective on the world of people analytics and talent intelligence. And then to wrap us up, I'll jump on with a few final words before we bid you all adieu until our next episode. So, without any more delay, over to you, Toby. Let's get the news on the road.
So to kick us off is an article that really riled me up and annoyed me, and so it's the Work and Pensions Secretary of the UK, Mel Stride, said that the UK has relied on foreign workers for too long, far too long in actual fact, and there's a hidden army of talent amongst Britons on benefits that could plug the labour market gaps. And this is obviously off the back of us changing our immigration rules so that any people coming in for skilled workers would have to be on 38 and a bit £1,000 a year, etc., etc. And it's basically saying that they want to bring in all these new programs to offer people that are on looking for work and are unemployed skills boot camps to try and upskill them and get them into the workforce, so that they're essentially looking at trying to minimize the impact of this increased salary threshold, which is going to reduce the number of people in the workforce by about 300,000 people a year, which is ideal. It's just annoyed me, if I'm going to be honest with you. It's just annoyed me every which way. It's the premise that we're now going to do this because for some reason we now need it, whereas for the last however many 100 years we've had unemployment benefits, etc. Why haven't we had skills boot camps then? Why haven't we tried to be getting these people back into the workforce then? It's suddenly going to be this route to these jobs, and there's if there was a really decent skills taxonomy, if I thought there was a really massive amount of research that's gone into it in terms of how do we upskill these individuals and give them the roles they need and the skills they need and putting them into the industry, etc. I just don't think they have. I think it's a short-sighted, flippant piece that's been thrown out there because they can see an election on the horizon and they're trying to address the massive mismatch and their terrible immigration policies. So it's just annoyed me every which way, to be honest, every which way.
Well, Patrick, I'm not going to expect you to comment on UK politics, but feel free if you want to. But Toby, I'm just in the interest of my public broadcasting hat. I've got to give the other kind of balanced view, which is Labour are talking about doing exactly the same thing, right? So whichever party you're talking about, there is this assumption that we have this pool of workers in the UK that we haven't trained and reskilled, which I think is true. But suddenly it becomes an election thing, as you said. And I think that there are, if we look at the different sectors, there are different reasons, right? Agriculture and hospitality are two sectors that really struggle to find workers. They're well below the salary limit that's now been put in. But equally, they're roles that people don't necessarily want. So it's more than just about upskilling people. And then there's these shortages in health and care, where we've got people who equally don't want to be healthcare assistants, or we're trying to train them as nurses. The NHS is one of the biggest importers, forgive the phrase, of talent. So I'm kind of with you. I think it's just election crud coming out.
Exactly that. And to be clear, this wasn't a political statement on my behalf. It's just
you've got all BBC on you.
But
that's not what you said before we started recording.
No, I would happily, as a drop kick him. No, I wouldn't. It's just if people care. If you want to upskill the workforce,
absolutely.
It's when people decide to use these in these moments politically, it just drives me insane. And yeah, I agree. I think the skills gaps here are the same as we discussed, I think, last month on the podcast, where I think we're going to really struggle philosophically, where you see a lot of the Gen AI automation coming in and role reduction coming in, and then the skills gap for the individuals that are left between the jobs that are newly created from this new technology versus the skills base they currently have. I just don't think that there's I don't think we understand enough around what's needed, and also I think that gap is going to be too big. I don't think there's going to be a path that's going to be anything remotely realistic in any kind of short or medium term. Long term, for sure, you could absolutely do it. Long term, put people on a long path to skills upskilling, etc. But the fact is, in the UK specifically, the education system isn't producing. We've already got kids for the best part of a decade to try and get them up to speed and skilled, etc. If we can't upskill them in a decade, why do we think a boot camp's suddenly going to fix the gap?
Yeah. Patrick, what happens in the Netherlands? Does this sort of talk over skills gaps and boot camps and migrating talent happen?
Yeah, so let me give you the Dutch perspective on this. I think if you look at the workforce and immigration as well, it's never about the opportunity. So that's, I kind of, with Toby, that it also annoys me sometimes, this discussion. So there's so many opportunities to use the talents these people have, upskill them. They can work in hospitals or anywhere where we have a lack of talent, but also where it's related to higher education. We're also thinking in the Netherlands of reducing the number of international students, which is also, I think, short-sighted, right?
Yeah.
Because we need a lot of those intelligent people in many of our industries. For instance, the tech industries in the south of the Netherlands. So it's, I don't know. It also annoys me how we talk about immigration, how we talk about the labor market. It's always about the problems and not about the opportunities.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. Thank you for that. And also for getting Toby off his high horse.
What's next then, Toby?
There's been I'm going to come to the round out in terms of the thought leadership around the TI space in a minute. But there was also, and it kind of ties into this, there was an article from the World Economic Forum on what can employers do to combat STEM talent shortages. And this was also, we had a big chat going on the WhatsApp group around this article and this topic. And for me, it fell a bit flat, if I'm going to be honest. There wasn't anything kind of evolutionary or revolutionary in here at all, considering it was coming from the World Economic Forum. It was kind of just saying, we need to do more employers, you need to do more education. We've tried, it's almost kind of admitting failure. It was like we've tried to get people more into STEM through the education systems and education policies, and it hasn't really worked. And it highlights kind of Japan trying to push this stuff forward, and it hasn't really pushed STEM on any further. And for me, it's always a bit of a one-sided argument where we kind of keep banging the same drums without really addressing any of the societal, topical, socio-political issues that mean we don't have more people in STEM. So, yeah, it was a bit of a strange one in that it's coming out of the World Economic Forum. I guess I'm really being down on news today. But I guess I was left wanting more. I kind of read it and I was like, is that really the best we can get coming out of the World Economic Forum?
That's what I thought. I think there was something, so there was a bit that said, what can employers do next? And it was all about new technologies, flexible staffing, employee brand, aging workforce, diversity. And you're just like, oh, yada, 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 right? Come on. And then there was a whole piece around visa sponsorship. So then we kind of tie into this full circle back to the high horse you've just been on. That is, oh my God, this is bigger than, it's everything that talent intelligence has been talking about for the last kind of 15 years, is that population demographics are impacting on us now. And yet it's only now that people are really beginning to see and feel what that looks like. And yet we've had 15 years to sort this out, right? And we haven't. So I guess at least it's top of the agenda, even if we don't have the solutions.
It made me laugh, the area under recruit and retain on the article. I was like, okay, but you're just telling one employer how to steal stuff from somebody else.
Yes.
That's not creating more talent. It's just making some organisations better at hiring it than others. But the problem it's just being moved then, isn't it? Somebody else has got a shortage.
Yeah, exactly. And you just end up with the same talent going around the same businesses over and over and over again. So, yeah. And AI is not going to be the answer to all of this, right? So it's kind of like people are just... And Toby, you've hit the nail on the head. This is about some of the societal challenges being tackled first in order for that to then come down and impact on skills shortages and workforces.
Having said all this, though, the silver lining of that article for me was, and it actually is what Alan just mentioned around recruit and retain, It was the actual quote is start by developing a much more granular understanding of what makes an attractive workplace for your employees. And it goes into like what benefits do they value, what do they look for from in terms of hybrid or flexible working, what work culture, etc., which is obviously all absolutely core TI type work and TI type capabilities. So although I was frustrated with the lack of vision, I did like the fact that it was at least pushing a TI, it wasn't obviously calling it talent intelligence, but a TI element of actually you need to get better understanding your workplace and your competitors to make this a more attractive offering. So at least that was a positive for me.
Yep.
That's exactly that. I don't think there's a holy grail, right? That otherwise we would have cracked it in the last 15 or 20 years, I guess. Where there's no holy grail. I think I'm not sure if I'm going to agree with Toby the whole podcast, but
oh no, don't do
that. On this topic, I do. I guess you have to understand what types of label pools are out there, either via the axis of ethnicity or gender, and make them understand why it's appealing to work for you and do that better as your competitor. And it's just hard work, I guess.
Yeah.
You do that and communicate and talk to them and understand them and be perseverant about it. I think if there was an easy way to do it, it was already implemented, I guess.
And this, I think, Patrick, will tie in, I hope, to the conversation that we have in a little while. But actually, by the time it gets to the point of it being with recruiters and talent acquisition, it's too late because you're reacting to what's in front of you. And I really hope that we can, when we start talking about evidence-based HR, that we'll talk more about exactly that.
Perfect. Yeah, because retention does actually help, doesn't it? If everybody retain their staff, you've got people running at a high degree of productivity generally, but a new joiner doesn't run at that kind of rate. So if you're constantly having to recruit and bring in new people and get them back up to speed, that means your overall productivity as a team is lower for that period of time. So actually, if people were better at creating better jobs and hiring in the first place and then retaining those people in those organisations, the collective productivity of the world's developers or STEM staff would be greater, so therefore we'd need less people.
But you've still got to allow for the fact that people are retiring and they're not coming in.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And companies are growing. So there's still, whatever happens, the kind of the big macro stuff means that you're right. Even if you retain all your good people, you're still losing people at the end of the spectrum.
Yeah, but exactly. Don't forget the Chancellor said he wants people to unretire. So they've got that covered. They're just not going to
stop it.
Jesus, it already feels long enough away without them to think about working until their mid-70s.
That was their words, not mine. I didn't say this.
Stop it. Stop it.
Go on then, Toby. What else is happening?
So, last couple of bits, a couple of thought pieces. So Guillaume wrote an awesome article on unlocking the power of talent intelligence and did that on LinkedIn, which I also put in the newsletter, I think, this month. So go check that out, which I really liked. It was very much a sort of TI that I think most of us practitioners would look at and go, yep, I read that. That is what I do as a job. And so it was really, really easy to dial into, really easy to kind of understand where he's going. And I like the fact he had a section in there on continuous learning and adaptation as well, which I liked. It was that whole kind of regular feedback loop, understanding your networks, conferences, etc. So I really liked his article. That was really solid.
Yeah.
This is how to break into TI. And then within the same few days, I think same week, I think it was, Josh Burson wrote an article or a big piece on enterprise talent intelligence. Or the full title is Enterprise TI Arrives Disrupting the HR Tech Market. And, we've been very vocal on here in the past around different definitions of talent intelligence and how it all fits together. And is some meaning more talent management analytics, some meaning more external labour market intelligence. And I think there's kind of that whole spectrum in between. And I'd say Josh's piece probably still does fit more into that, what I would class as talent management analytics space. But I think at the same time, that's challenging all of our perceptions of what TI is. And I think that's, we are seeing more and more conversations with the full talent life cycle and that full spectrum piece. And I think particularly as at a moment when you're seeing more and more firms trying to dial up skills-based hiring and skills-based work profiling and everything else, you are seeing talent intelligence as a term used more and more within people analytics, talent management analytics, etc. So yeah, I kind of get it. I think all of our perceptions and all of our kind of goalposts are moving slightly as this all develops and it evolves. But it was I'm never going to say it's a bad thing that anybody's writing anything about TI. So for me, the fact that Josh is getting the word out there and pushing the boat, as it were, is always going to be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think the bit on this that's really nice is, it's talking about matching vast amounts of data about internal employees, against data in the external labour market, right? Which is what we've been talking about, magic happening when you bring internal and external data together, and that's effectively what he's talking about doing, which is which leads really nicely, I think, into the conversation we're going to have with Patrick.
Yep,
I was a little bit confused about the term talent intelligence professional. I think Josh Burson used that term because when you read the two posts and the articles, it is evidence-based HR in its nature, right? It's people analytics. Maybe the new thing, you're right, Alison, is including that external data source, but that also is happening already. Depending on the use case, right? If that's a valuable use case for your organization to use external data, it already happened in the last 10 years as well. So the implication of calling it a talent intelligence professional makes me think, okay, is that someone outside the people analytic practice or inside the people analytic practice? How does that work? That question popped up when I wrote that article of George.
Yeah, I'm not sure it matters. And I think as we're moving forward, Patrick, it's a really valid point. But I think actually it's the kind of using external data to provide context to whatever the plans are, I think is where the whole world is going. And whether that external data sits in an internal intelligence function, whether it sits in a centralized intelligence function, whether it sits in people analytics or whether it sits separately, I'm not sure it matters any longer. It's about kind of making sure that context is provided.
I guess that's true, but maybe from a CHRO or management team point of view, they could think, okay, do I need to hire new people here with new skill sets, or can I tap into my mature people analytic practice that's already there and start doing talent intelligence, including external data sources with them?
That is a great point. And I think, so why don't we do that, Toby, right? Is it a different skill set?
See, I think there's a huge amount of crossover. I think there's a huge amount of grey space between, and whether you're looking at the sub-functions within HR, whether it's people analytics, SWP, talent acquisition analytics, talent management analytics, talent intelligence, yada, yada, yada. I think there's lots of parallel and complementary skill sets within there. I think where it does get slightly different for I won't say talent intelligence, but the external labour market data, I think it's the quality of the data is a lot more haphazard. It's not as clean. So you do end up with data sets where you do have to have a bit more of a subject matter expertise to understand what am I really looking at here, because you do have to get under that hood a little bit more than, say, a traditional people analytics function where it's that little bit cleaner and you've got more control. But Patrick, I'd love, you're the people analytics expert. I'd love to hear your take, whether I'm being unfair on that or whether you think there is probably a subject matter expertise piece that would come into play.
Well, I kind of agree that a lot of the external data is maybe not on par yet, but that's also true for many of the internal data sources. But that's, I guess, the job of the people analytic expert, the data scientist, the translator, behavioral scientist to make sense out of it, right? I mean, building your models allows you also to, kind of increase the quality of your data set, if you will. And lots of those external data sources have been provided by, I think we're talking about Talent Insights from LinkedIn, I guess, or Glassdoor. Not sure what tools or vendors are appropriate here. And I think they're really, really useful. But I'm confused how the data can be used in different modeling. But I guess it's an open question, I guess. But it's definitely very interesting. But what I'm afraid of is that it's being pushed from a vendor perspective, right? I mean, you have to start with the use case. If it's valuable for your organization to look into external data, because, for instance, your talent acquisition has a hard time finding the right people, or location strategies, building location strategies, then it's useful to apply that data, but not because vendors are telling you to do it. It's the same with organizational network analysis. I think 5 years ago, we always said, okay, it's a beautiful analysis, but if we don't have the use case, we're not going to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think, it would be remiss of me not to say Strategens is a vendor, Patrick. So, I need to be upfront about that. But
sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. But the bit that you said that's 100% correct is, I think, to be successful in this space, you've got to have an HR or talent background. You can't just be a tech business, because without that, you're just pushing tech for the sake of it, rather than saying, what is the business case? What is the problem that we are trying to solve? Right. Now let's talk about that problem. And you hit the nail on the head, right? Location analysis, typically. Yes, TA, how can we think differently? Or what we call recruiter enablement, right? How can we think differently about where these skills are? But increasingly, the user cases are around DEI, or around skills and adjacent skills. And I think that's where it's really interesting, because there's kind of this understanding of our internal world, right? What do we look like? And then from that, what can happen is that organizations can set themselves ambitions or goals, particularly around DE&I, that frankly are not achievable, because they're not then balanced against what's available in the external market. And what then happens is you end up with business leaders going, well, what the heck am I supposed to do, right? You've set me an ambition that we can't achieve. Or the vice versa of that is, you've set an ambition that's too low. And so there's this kind of combination of context. But external data is not, that context is not relevant in all decisions, right? But it is relevant in some fairly big ones from an HR perspective. Yeah.
I agree.
Now, Alan, can I jump in and ask some questions yet? I kind of already have.
I think it's time, so why don't we?
Sorry.
Ask away.
Thank you. Sorry, I already had, so I was like, I'm going to get told off. So, Patrick, if I kind of do this properly, you touched on the fact that you kind of majored your career in ABN AMRO. It would be brilliant if you can. You started out life as a recruiter, and then I think spent 19 or 20 years in the organisation with a little dive out. Can you kind of give us a view of how you saw people analytics develop during that time at ABN AMRO?
Sure, I can. I'm not sure if it's a good thing to be 20 or 25 years with the same company, but I did a lot of different things. So actually, I started in IT as well. I actually was a programmer in COBOL.
Okay, very cool.
It's a mainframe language.
Yeah.
Nobody uses it anymore. Oh, I'm sure they do, but it wasn't really my thing. Then I moved to HR, indeed in recruitment, and did different projects, strategy projects. I set up a recruitment department, and eventually came in the HR management team of ABN AMRO. And the fun thing there is that we had a lot of discussions about, okay, but why are things actually happening? And if we invest in a leadership program, how do we know it's actually effective or not? And I asked a lot of those questions, and I think in the end I annoyed everyone. So I had to create this department myself called HR Analytics. No, I'm just kidding. But it's so it's actually around 2013 that we said, okay, these are actually valid questions. We need to understand better why we are investing in things and how the workforce is actually helping our business to perform. Can you still hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
All my screens are black.
Yep.
Oh,
So
well, we've still got you, so please keep going, Patrick.
Yeah, that's good. So I started in 2013, like I said, and we started deliberately with advanced analytics.
Okay.
Just to have a steeper learning curve. So we decided not to be responsible for reporting.
Yeah.
with all the operational stuff attached to it. So we worked with a vendor at that time who did the data analytics called Agnostics.
Mm-hmm.
They were later taken over by Deloitte. And in time, we onboarded different HR evidence-based services, if you will. So we start working on strategic workforce management and the analytical support for that. We onboarded the whole BI reporting, dashboarding services. We inherited the survey, the engagement survey, and transformed that into a more modular, sample-based survey calendar throughout the year. We did some upskilling. So actually, all evidence-based services were in one hand, and I think that's a good thing to have, because then you're flexible and more effective in answering strategic questions that come into you. And so that's kind of a quick journey of how the practice started and emerged over the years.
And I love that, because one of the things that you've talked about is, it's kind of, I had to create this thing because I was irritated. And I get that. I 100% get that. I kind of think, and I talk about this a lot and people get cross with me, but I talk about, if we treated our access to the skills that we need as a business, our human capital, if we treated our access to that in the same way that we treat our access to financial capital, as organizations, we would be much better prepared for the world of work. And yet we don't do that. So I guess there's this question for me that says, why isn't HR typically involved more strategically? And then linked to that, what is in your definition evidence-based HR?
Let's start with the last one. Evidence-based HR for me is starting first with a clear business opportunity or problem that you wanna understand.
Yep.
And then use a very evidence-based approach to get to the right answer.
Yeah.
And I think people like Rob Briner and other people talking about evidence-based HR for already many, many years or decades.
Yeah.
But it's really important to do it, maybe not in an academic way, but maybe a little bit more academical
yes.
way, to ensure that you're not making the wrong decisions. I mean, it's mind-blowing how organizations make a decision looking at a pivot table saying this number is higher than this one, so let's go there.
Yes.
And that is mind-blowingly, sorry for my Dutch, stupid.
No.
So it's about decreasing the levels of insecurity about finding the right answer. And you have a very clear approach in doing that. Is the data you're using valid? Is the data quality okay? Are the models valid and performing? And if you can answer a question by a pivot table, by all means do it. It's not a goal to build statistical models or machine learning models, but it's about doing the utmost as an organization to understand your workforce and make the right decisions. And now I forgot about your first question.
No, that's okay. We can come back to that, which is, and I will. I'll come back to it in a second. But I think the bit that for me is really interesting in what you're saying is, our strapline, so our kind of external stuff is faster, smarter, better decisions. But when we talk about it, we talk about how do we stop organizations making stupid decisions? So it refers back into your Dutch. It's like, why are organizations not doing this through a data-led approach? And I guess that then ties into the question that I'll bring back to the fore, which is, why do you think HR isn't, as a whole, thinking about this and involved more strategically? Recognizing that there are some leaders who are brilliant at it.
Yeah, that's maybe the first thing I want to say. I mean, HR is absolutely evolving.
Yeah.
And that it's absolutely doing a better job. I met so many people who are thinking in the same way. So I don't want to make the impression that it's all bad, right? Definitely not. We came from far away, and I think we developed definitely. But I think it's also about it takes effort, right? And maybe talking about people, talking about behavior, it kind of suggests everybody can talk about it. Everybody can have an opinion about it.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to talk about. It's something completely different than neuroscience, right? I would have difficulties talking about neuroscience in a casual way. But about people and workforce, people talk in a very intuitive way about those topics. But it doesn't mean that their opinions are grounded in science or grounded in proper analysis. So it's harder, I guess, to say, okay, but we really need to crack this and we need to build a model around it. And then people typically say, well, we kind of know how it works, right? So let's go left. And that's, I think, always out there. That risk is always out there.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it kind of, this reverts back full circle to some of the things we were saying at the beginning of our call today, which was actually that it's only now that the macroeconomics are creating an environment where if you don't get this right, it hurts the organization as a whole. Right. Historically, it hasn't not mattered. Of course, it's mattered. It's mattered in every organization, but it's been easy to pass the problem down to the front line and down to recruiters or down to talent acquisition or down to your HR business partner. And now it isn't. Now this is fundamental to the success of an organization. Do you agree?
I agree.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, if I may, when it goes well within an organization, then you typically see investments in people analytics.
Yes.
That makes sense. But when it's not going so well within an organization, actually then you should invest in people analytics even more, because it will help you make the right decisions and optimize your workforce and create effective interventions. So if the organization has less money to spend, you actually need people analytics even more than in an upside economy.
I love the fact that you've just talked about that, because actually we're in the middle of doing some research at the moment using our data that says if we look at the organisations that are successful and we look at the number or the growth in both their people analytics and their talent intelligence functions, can we see a correlation? So can we see a correlation between the better performing organisations? Because we have a hypothesis that says those organisations that have evidence-based HR and in our case provide context to it from the external world where it's applicable are better performing organisations.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think that that's not necessarily cause and effect? It could be the other way around. So to Patrick's point, the better organisations are doing people analytics rather than they're better because of people analytics.
Don't know. Could well be. Yeah. It's just start with the hypothesis, grab the data, and let's see where it takes us. But this concept of there is a link between evidence-based HR and organisational success. It's almost, it doesn't matter whether the dog is wagging the tail or the tail is wagging the dog, if that makes sense. This is about successful organisations thinking about people in a different way.
Like anything else, it puts that as a concept on the radar for those less successful organisations who may think this is something we should be doing.
Absolutely,
they're doing it.
Yeah, 100%, right? Because the world is moving so fast that those organisations that aren't are going to be left behind, right, to Patrick's point. Patrick, can you talk about any examples where you have combined internal data and external data?
Yes. Let me come up with a good example. I think we used it in the area of recruitment in most cases. So it's just small exercises like if we have a vacancy, what are the words that our competitors are using in attracting those talents?
Yep.
So that's one case, I guess. Location strategies a little bit.
Yep.
And then definitely tools like Talent Insights from LinkedIn is useful. So where is talent concentrated? Although I think with hybrid working and remote working, that maybe gets less important for some organizations, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have per se need people on the floor. So those are just some examples. But to be honest, I think 90% of the use cases we did were done with internal data. There's so much internal data already that we didn't tap into. So that was our first focus. And that's where the use cases drove us to.
Yeah, really interesting. Now, you said right at the very beginning of this call, you mentioned your research and your PhD. And you said it was easier to write this word than it was to say it, but I'm going to have a go. So you talked about the institute. I knew I was going to do that. Institutionalization. There you go. of workforce analytics, so the adoption within organisations. Talk to us about your research. What kind of inspired you to do it? How far down are you? Or can you give us any key findings yet?
Absolutely. So maybe a small anecdote how it started. So I was still working with ABN AMRO, and there were organizations coming to us, not per se to me, but to the team, with questions. Okay, how do you do it? How can you do analytics? What are the benefits? What is the value? We can't get it from the ground. Can you help me a little bit? So that's actually when I started to think about, okay, why are, not that ABN AMRO was the only organization that was successful, not at all, but why are some organizations a little bit more successful than others?
Yeah.
And why do some of those organizations fail? So what factors actually drive the adoption and institutionalization of advanced analytics? So we focused in the research on using advanced analytics technology. So inferential statistics and machine learning modeling.
Okay.
So that's when it started. And then I started to talk to some of my friends in the network. And I started a PhD at Tilburg University. And my committee is Sjoerd van der Heuvel, Carina van der Voorde, Jaap Pauwe, all Dutch names.
Yep.
But some famous names in HR and people analytics as well.
Yeah.
And the first study, and the results were published last year in Human Resource Magazine review journal. That was a literature review. So I looked at the workforce domain, but also the business analytics domain. What do papers tell us about factors driving adoption and institutionalization? And there were 68 papers I needed to read. I did it in the summer on the balcony somewhere at my, I think it was in Spain that I wrote most of the papers.
Okay.
Just so that you know.
Is it? Well, no, I'm imagining it. I have a picture in my head. It's important to paint the picture.
Not really important, but and maybe so everybody can read the paper. It's available on my LinkedIn profile. But I think I want to mention 4 highlights of that research. And one thing is, it's also true within business analytics and in workforce analytics, but within business analytics, there's more proof because they're a little bit more ahead of the curve.
Yep.
Having a strategy or organizational fit with everything you do in people analytics is key. And I already talked about it a few times about, okay, if your use case is important to your organization or creates value to your organization or is aligned with strategy, there's absolutely one of the factors that is driving adoption and ongoing institutionalization. If you don't do that, you're not delivering real strategic value to your organization and you will fail.
Yeah.
The second one is something I call dynamic capabilities. And it's about also integrating evidence-based services. So we see that people analytic practices or evidence-based practices that integrate survey management with modeling, with reporting, with strategic workforce management in one responsibility is better able to answer strategic questions. Because when you get a strategic question, it's hardly ever the case that you can answer it always with a report.
Yes.
Or always with a model. So you have to combine those things and have to be creative. If all those responsibilities lie somewhere else in your organization, it becomes less effective, right? You need to negotiate for capacity and maybe budget. So that's something we call dynamic capabilities. If you have that in one hand, integrated services, you're more successful. Third one is, it's a lot about data science, right? People analytics, but let's not forget in HR, you have to balance that with behavioral science as well.
Yeah.
So understand it's behavioral data in many cases we work with, specifically if it's coming from surveys. So understanding behavior of people, psychology, psychometrics is as important as data science, to my opinion, and also according to the research. And the last one, and the rest you can read in the paper, is about data management, which is very intuitive and logic from a business analytics perspective. They kind of start with data management. Let's make sure our data pipeline is on par and that we understand how the whole data flows through our dashboards and our models. But HR is not so fond of data management yet.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that it's an interesting discussion maybe that who can look at data integration best? Is that the HRIT leader, or is that for organizations where the people analytic practice is more mature? Maybe that person can also do a lot in data management and think about data integration, because that's how he or she builds models and functionality for the organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. And interestingly, I think linked to that kind of ties back in many ways to the question that we were having over, do you need a subject matter expert in external data and where do they sit? That kind of becomes part of your total data management strategy, because you've got to be able to compare apples with apples, right? And the only way you can do that is by understanding how your data pipelines internally sit and work and what they look like, and then making sure that you can get the same externally. So yeah, really, really interesting that ties it all together. Can you, you've just published, and I only scanned my eyes over it because it appeared on LinkedIn today, so forgive me, but you've talked about this new way of working for HR. Clearly people can go to your LinkedIn profile and find it, but can you tell me about the reason, first of all, the reason why you wrote that, and then secondly, give us your kind of overview on it.
Sure, I posted today.
Yes, I know, about 4 hours ago.
So it's already very good that you spotted. It's excellent. Yeah. No. I guess a lot of underlying concepts that I talk about in that post are not new, right? Mm-hmm. So doing employee listening, doing workforce management, those topics exist already for many, many years, even decades. My point in this post is, coming back to that dynamic capability and integrating of services, is that you have to build a capability in HR where everything starts. And like I said in the post, I'm biased. I love people analytics and evidence-based HR, so I'm biased, but do challenge me. I think the new HR target operating model, if you will, should really start around evidence-based and business case-led prioritization. Yeah. If you want to do anything in recruitment, offboarding, diversity, or reskilling, or training and development, or onboarding, you should have a clear business case and prove why that is important for the organization in that moment. And if not, you can maybe upscale, downscale some of those COE domains, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how we think or how we act. So again, underlying concepts are the same, but I guess it's more about getting really serious about evidence-based HR, and positioning it in the middle of the management team of HR. And maybe, to close, it's also interesting to think about, do we need a different, and I'm going to insult a lot of people, hopefully not, but do we need a new breed of CHRO as well, that really gets this and knows how to position people analytics at the center of the way of working in HR?
I love that. I think one of the things that we talk about as a business, and it's a slightly it's in a different context, but I think the model applies, which is we talk a lot about joining the dots. There is no point in understanding just talent unless you're understanding that in the concept of where your business needs to go and where its footprint is, or how you're going to grow, or what your future strategy is, right? So you've got to join the dots between those functions. And effectively, that's what you're saying with, particularly with the data management piece, is you've got to join the dots. It's all got to be in one pace, because when that whole data management piece is in one pace, then you can start to think about what are the business cases and the strategic business cases. And then you can start to say, right, if it is to do with the strategy of this business, then it is worth us understanding the evidence and the data in order to support that strategy. I think, and I get that. I completely understand that and can hear your passion about it. And does that mean we need a new breed of CHRO? I'll put my neck on the line and say absolutely it does in some cases, right? It's just, and that some is probably the majority of cases, because there are very few organisations still doing this properly. Yeah. But I'm going to caveat that by saying, but the ones that are doing it brilliantly.
And there was one comment on my post this morning. The whole of HR should live and breathe evidence-based HR, and of course that person was right. But I just wanted to make the emphasis on the CHRO and maybe the management team
Yeah.
a little bit broader.
Yeah, actually, that's a fair point, isn't it? Yeah, I know that, and I'm going back years ago now, so before I set up Strategens. But one of the conversations we used to have was that, without a doubt, one of the top 3 priorities in a company's annual report would always be people. People are our top priority, right? Yeah, and actually, 15, 20 years ago, it was kind of a flippant comment that appeared in an annual report. But actually what we're seeing now is actually it really matters, and it really matters to the CEOs of this business and the business leaders of the business. And I guess that's why we're seeing this switch into more strategic. What does the future hold for people analytics?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, hopefully being part of that new target operating model in a different way
Yeah.
that I just talked about. And I think there's also still a lot to learn about people analytic practices. So if we talk about a difficult word, institutionalization, what does it really mean, right? So it's not about using the most data sources, using the most fancy tools. It's something about that strategy fit being accepted, products and solutions being routinized in the organization. That's also kind of the second study we're doing now is focusing on. So what are the characteristics of institutionalization? And so a lot of questions are still out there, but I think, more today and in the years to come, I think the machine learning models leading to AI, I personally don't like the terminology of AI.
No, me neither.
Predominantly, I think it's machine learning models.
Yep.
But the new machine learning models out there, the functionality that is being built either by vendors or internally organizations are really powerful and helpful. And because they are on the intersection of, or I have to say it differently, it's democratizing the use of intelligence by the end user in the organization. And you don't maybe need the people analytic expert always somewhere in the process to understand what is happening, or you don't need a dashboard. So generative AI is actually helping you collect insights instantly if you ask the right question, right, to the software. So I think that's really, really powerful. At the same time, it's still machine learning modeling. I also enjoyed the digital twin link you sent, Toby. But AI is not self-aware software yet, right? I mean,
No.
I think we're decades away from that.
I'm so pleased that somebody has said that, Patrick, because particularly actually when I look at some of our competition and they talk about, we've got an AI integrated model. You're like, no, you haven't. It's just machine learning, right, on large data sets, and you're using a buzzword, right? It drives me bananas. But I think you're right. It's how do we then use some Gen AI to help end users interrogate that data in a more natural way, so that they don't have to rely on what either talent intelligence or people analytics or Strategens version of that data is. It means that they can ask their own questions. And I think that the more that message can go out in the bigger, wider world, then the more it's going to help the future of organizations thinking about how they democratize intelligence in some way.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe a last point about the future of people analytics, maybe. And that is it's not the most sexy topic, but it is about governance. So I think in the end, and it's been said 10 years ago as well, but you see it emerging more and more in the organization, is people analytics and risk analytics and marketing analytics moving into a sort of enterprise analytics practice.
Yes.
Where data is shared, data scientists' skills are shared. And I think that will be left in people analytics will be those that behavioral science skills, I guess. And of course, prioritization on the right topics. So there will always be people analytics in HR, but I guess economies of scale will drive to a more enterprise analytical setup, I guess.
Yeah. So on that piece, are you imagining, just so I'm understood correctly, like an enterprise level data analytics, data engineering, warehousing, data cleansing, all the kind of skill set standardization type piece, and then the subject matter expertise, you'd keep people in people analytics or marketing analytics, whatever. So you have the kind of subject matter expertise closer to the business, and then all of anything that can be standardized and core and common, bring that all to the center.
Yeah, exactly that.
Because in many cases, right, the data is the same. Which I think is just, it's like, particularly if you think about the data that talent intelligence use and marketing intelligence use, it is really the same data, right? It's just split out for different user cases. What are the skills that this person has, and what are they likely to be interested in?
And what is enterprise analytics, by the way? I mean, if you go 10 years back, our first use case that we did was connecting HR data with sales data.
Yes.
So it was that you could already argue that was already enterprise analytics.
Yes.
Only you're using HR data as well to explain or to come up with the right answer, right? So combining all those data sets to answer the most strategic, valuable questions for organization is actually requiring to look at it from an enterprise view instead of a siloed view.
100%.
Why do you think it isn't happening more then? Because I remember writing in the book about having a centralized intelligence function. And it feels like there's been quite a few people that have touched on it and collaborated with other Intel functions. And it almost, to a certain extent, feels like a no-brainer to bring this stuff together. And yet, I don't think I've seen any organizations really bring enterprise intelligence together in a effective way. So what do we think is holding it back?
And you wrote a book about it, you said?
Well, talent intelligence. I was on a specific on that one. But yeah, one of the future states.
But it's a good question. And I honestly, I don't know the answer. And I think that's also why we do that PhD research. So in this research and the next, this is what we're trying to look for. Why is analytics, starting from an HR perspective, not successful? And how does governance, which is one of the factors, right, and enterprise analytics, how does that play a role in being effective or not in the end? So I don't know. I think a lot of organizations also don't think in long-term strategies. They implement because it's opportunistic, right? We can invest now, or we have to cut some costs now, and maybe a little bit more anecdotal. I also talked to many organizations in the last year, and where I have to be specific, where a people analytic leader is leaving, in some cases, and again, it's anecdotal, they tend to break up the practice. So it's going the other way.
Wow.
And again, maybe it's not a real trend, but it's interesting to follow and to research. Where is people analytics going? So that's also why I posted that post this morning, to stretch it a little bit back to, enterprise analytics and integrating services instead of breaking it all down again. I'm not sure if that was a question to your answer, Toby. Sorry.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's almost like change for change's sake. But I think, and to a certain extent, I think you answered Toby's question, Patrick, earlier in some ways, which is, everything is driven by strategic priorities. Strategic priorities are driven by shareholder value, right? Which might be short, medium, or long term, depending on what's going on in the world at that time. And everything takes effort, right? And particularly in our space, the results take some time for the big stuff, right? And so you kind of get stuck in this loop of really not doing anything, which I think is random. So I've got one more question, if I may, Patrick. And I'm conscious that you've got another meeting in 10 minutes, but I've got my last and final question, which is, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to an organisation that hasn't got anything in the way of people analytics or talent intelligence now, what would they be?
Then I would refer them immediately to my 10 golden rules of people analytics on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it's about having that strategic fit, and you and just start, right? So people sometimes think it's so complex. You can make it very complex, but if you have one data set, you can do analytics tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So start small, make it business relevant, and as you go, try to integrate those different services so you can be more effective. Be serious about your privacy legislation and regulations. Involve legal and compliance as soon as possible. Don't be afraid of AI. Embrace it, but also be practical about it, what it really is. We touched upon it a few minutes ago. And there are some couple of more in the 10 golden rules.
Perfect. So I think my wrapping up then for anybody who's interested in where to start people analytics. What does evidence-based HR mean, look like, and how do you start to look at this through the lens of advanced analytics and not just let me do an employee survey? Connect with Patrick on LinkedIn. Patrick now works for a business called Kennedy Fitch, and I'm certain would be more than happy to have a conversation with you about where the future of people analytics in your organisation could be. And Patrick, I look forward to us connecting further and exploring more how we can start to expand your knowledge of some of the TI vendors. I think that's important. I need you to be saying Stratagens more often, but also to be thinking about actually the kind of external data, internal data. How does it all fit together, and kind of what's the opportunity? So, for me, that's been a really, really interesting use of time, and I'm thrilled that we've managed to connect.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Not at all.
You're more than welcome, and almost a perfect round hour for the show, which is always good. I kind of like that. For some reason in my head, I like round numbers. But as much as we would love to keep going, we probably need to let Patrick get back to his busy schedule. You mentioned you've got a meeting in about now 7 minutes, Patrick. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. How was the experience for you?
It was very nice. It's a very natural and formal discussion. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Good. We aim to please. Always. And to our amazing listeners, you know the drill. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. So keep spreading the word about us to your friends and colleagues. And if you haven't been telling people about us, now is the perfect time to start. So until next time, stay intelligent, folks. Bye.
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 Thanks for listening. Before you go, I wanted for the last time to remind you about our generous sponsor, Stratagens. Here's that posh chap again, telling you about their fabulous product.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's STRATIGENS.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.